Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and delegates, guests, and of course, thank you, Joanita, for availing yourself for this presentation this morning. Thank you so much. I know we always say thank you, but we really do appreciate it, and we really do mean it when we say thank you for your the knowledge and your expertise that you bring towards the guest speaker series. And yes, Prof. Pete, if you perhaps have a few words.
Yes. So guys, thank you very much, Joanita, joining us from Spain. So we've known Joanita, and Joanita is one of our key features as the guest speakers goes. And we I think Joanita sort of did work with the varsity anyway before the time, but she was the Scrum Master at Clientele when Clientele had all of the initiatives and there was like millions of things going on. And then, and thank goodness, still friends with us. Even though Joanita, you with TalkShow in Spain now, am I right?
Yes, that's correct. So after Clientele, I worked for a software development company called MIP. That's right. And now I'm still working for a company in Durban, although I am based in Spain. So.
I mean, that's the wonderful thing, isn't it? I mean, Joanita, I had a nice chat with Australia this morning before I went online. And they were like, so can you get some business analysts and some designers and stuff for us? I said, yeah, does it matter where they are? They said, no, it just matters what they deliver, you know? So it is nice. But Joanita, thank you very much for doing a presentation for us again. I did tell everybody how amazing you are, so I'm just giving you a heads up. And we've got a really nice group, Joanita. As we start, they'll most probably pop up to somewhere in the 50s, if not 60. And what I really like with this specific group is they really wanting to make it happen. So they really enjoy sharing with people that's actually got to face the stuff for real. So without wasting now any more of your time, Joanita, so I'm just going to hand over to you, Joanita, and everybody just enjoy enjoy the session. You will.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Prof. And as always, I really appreciate being invited here. I love talking to you guys. I love sharing knowledge. And the great thing about doing these things is I also learn from everybody else around I used to say around the room, but now it's around the world almost. So great to be here. So thank you, guys. Yeah, and as Prof said, you know, this is a learning session, sharing session. So if you have questions, please put up your hand. I might not always see your hand up because I am looking at the presentation, but I'm going to switch off my camera so that it's not too slow. And then, yeah, please feel free to ask questions, but it's great to be here. And yeah, it's thank you so much for the opportunity. So today I'm going to talk about Agile project management. It's just the basics of Agile. I know with Prof, you guys are going through a lot of details on the advanced project management course. So they definitely a lot more to this than what I can cover in an hour. So, but this is definitely just scraping the surface in terms of Agile project management. Sorry, let me just see how I can get my presentation to move on. I don't know. Okay, so yeah, hello, great to be here. My name is Joanita. As Prof said, I've worked mainly in financial services and IT. At Clientele, I was part of the change journey to move over to an Agile and Scrum framework. This is where I was introduced to Scrum, and I was one of the Scrum Masters who were driving the change in terms of adapting the new way of doing things around Clientele. Then I moved to MIP. MIP is a development house that implements software products for different companies. I worked on projects for Vodacom and for TalkShow, and then from there, TalkShow decided that I need to come and work for them, and this is where I've been doing work not just in the IT space, but also business projects across the TalkShow business. So, and also I'm a part-time lecturer for the University of the Free State. We've come a long way. I think, Marie, you've seen me aged here, so it's been great working with you guys. So just quick overview, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction. I'm going to talk to you about my biggest Agile journey, and this is why I'm talking to you from Spain today. And then I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of Agile project management. We're going to touch on some Scrum, and then just to close off, talking about people being agile or doing agile. And I think that's a big difference in a lot of the companies nowadays. A lot of people are going through the motion, but they're not necessarily being agile. So just, on my agile journey, I'm currently in Spain, but it's not been that easy. I call this past year the year of 2 summers and 3 countries. For anybody who wants to immigrate, I can highly recommend it, but immigrating in the midst of a pandemic it's a bit more challenging than I think it would have been if it was just a normal immigration. I mean, things have changed over the past year, but you can picture yourself, June last year, lockdowns, travel restrictions, lots of uncertainty. Just in terms of my story, we couldn't fly directly into Spain, so we had to go to Bulgaria for 2 months. So that just put a lot of interesting aspects towards our journey, and getting the right documentation. I mean, you probably know just dealing with South African Home Affairs is a challenge at the best of times, but if you go and you need certain documents and everybody's closed because there was a new COVID case, then tomorrow you go again. So it was quite a challenge just getting on a plane in the first place, never mind just immigrating. Lots of admin that's related to it. And I think the big challenge for us as a family was just making decisions with very limited knowledge. We couldn't come to Spain to see where do we want to live, what are we going to rent, go and check out a couple of schools for our kids. We literally had to make so many decisions based on the limited information we had while still sitting in South Africa. So I enrolled my kids by having online virtual meetings with schools, not actually seeing the school, not understanding where the school is, renting a place for us to stay without having any idea what does the traffic look like, is there even a good road towards the place. So it's been quite interesting. And I think just adapting to a different country, new language, new culture, I mean, that was just, it's still a challenge. I mean, my Spanish is very limited. I'm trying to learn, but it's not as easy as it is, for example, for my 10-year-old who's already speaking sentences in Spanish. But I think the big thing I've learned with this is you need to have a plan A, B, and C, because things change, and then you just regroup and say, okay, fine, what are we going to do next? And let's rethink the whole process. But yeah, we're all still sane. I am in Spain, and yeah, we made it. So it's great to be here. And yeah, that was just part of the introduction in terms of saying this has been my agile journey, and just realizing that you cannot be inflexible in today's world. It's just hectic in terms of that.
Joanita, looking at all the hands, you just got a lot of admiration.
Oh wow, thank you. And the fact that I'm still survive. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, so we're not going to question you about agility.
Okay. Right. Yes, that's true. I think what has made it easy in a way is the fact that we could all still work while being online. It was tough though, because I still had projects to deliver, and trying to say, okay, fine, we pack all our life's things in a couple of suitcases. And I mean, I need to tell you, we traveled with 18 suitcases, which was quite hectic, but and you half unpacked, and then you need to quickly check in online for meetings and deadlines and things like that. So no, it's been very interesting. But yeah. All right, any questions? Are you guys happy for me to actually get to the real meat of the story? Okay, so what is Agile? So in Agile, we're going to look at definitions, principles, some values, and then different flavors and methodologies around Agile. So if you look at the dictionary, Agile is the ability to move quickly and easily, ability to think quickly and in an intelligent way. So I think just referring back to my trip to Spain, we literally had to be quick and easy, change things on the fly. So that definitely happened. And I think also, if you guys have to think back to when the lockdowns just started, how quickly a lot of your companies had to make everybody work from home, set up processes and systems that didn't even exist. So that was how we all learned quickly to adjust and to be more agile than what we were before all these lockdowns and things started. Okay, so according to the Agile Handbook, guys, sorry, I just have to apologize. I do have flu, so if my voice sounds a bit funny, I'm trying my best to keep it up and to speak loud and clear enough. So if you don't mind, I might just clear my throat once in a while. Definition, Agile project management, according to the Agile Handbook, Agile is a way to manage projects. As Agile realizes that projects are inherently unpredictable, it also embraces the unpredictability by breaking down projects into small chunks. This approach makes it easy to prioritize, add and drop features mid-project. So it's about making those changes and not just trying to do one big thing at a time. Tackle the small chunks that you can. Okay, Agile Project Management for Dummies defines Agile as a style of project management that focuses on the early delivery of business value. It involves continuous improvement of the project's product and processes, scope flexibility, team input, and delivering well-tested products that reflect customer needs. Agile summarizes, Agile is a way of developing software that reminds us that although computers run the code, it's people who create and maintain it. Then Agile is a framework, attitude, and approach to software delivery that is lean, fast, and pragmatic. And unfortunately, Agile is no silver bullet. I think a lot of people do think that Agile can fix everything, but it is not necessarily true. We often have a plan, and then sometimes it doesn't even look the way we thought it's going to look. So we all know what this feels like. So what is Agile? Agile, you break big problems into smaller ones. You focus on the really important stuff and forget everything else. You make sure what you deliver actually works. You ask for feedback often. So it's about testing, going back to your customers, asking them for feedback on what you have done, and then change course when necessary. You can't just always say, this is the way I said I'm going to do things and I'm not changing, because unfortunately we live in a world where you cannot not change anymore. And everybody is accountable. It's not just the manager's job to be accountable. Every single person who commits to the work needs to be accountable for what they've done, what they've built, and what they have checked in at the end of the day. So in summary, instead of building a website big website that will take you 3 months, you start by doing one page at a time. You do your home page, and you work on your blog, and you can actually deliver those little pieces bit by bit and take them live before the whole website is done. And then I think this is just one of the items that I got from the Scrum document. So you want something that moves, maybe start off with a skateboard and then add the features until you've built a car. We can't just build the car up front if you need a vehicle to move around in. So it's just building it in smaller pieces. I know I do refer a lot to IT because that's my frame of reference. This is where I'm working. But Agile is not just an IT thing anymore. It did start off with IT many, many years ago. But according to Forbes, Agile is now used in so many different other departments in organizations as well. You can see finance, supply chain, HR. So it's not just an IT thing. Okay, Agile consists of the manifesto and some values, principles, and then different practices and flavors. And we quickly touch on those as well. So the Agile values talks about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So it doesn't mean that processes and tools are not important. So single-minded focus on processes and tools restricts new ideas and makes it harder for people to conform to processes. Agile teams strive to eliminate unproductive and time-consuming processes to maximize the amount of work not done. So it's about not just focusing on the process and making sure that you fill in all the different forms and duplicate. It's about having those conversations, making sure that you understand what are the actual requirements from your clients. Another agile value is working software over comprehensive documentation. And I think this is one of the big myths, is that documentation is not important. Agile teams focus on delivering working software frequently instead of creating comprehensive documentation upfront. In some of the first projects I worked in many moons ago, we used to have lever arch files with requirements, and nobody would start writing one line of code until all those files and files and files of documents have been signed off. Nowadays, you only do documentation just in time. What's needed, when it's needed, get it signed off, and then that is what you build. So instead of scoping everything up front and getting your BAs to work for months on the requirements, you do just-in-time documentation. Okay, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Agile frameworks encourage collaboration, early feedback, and an environment of mutual trust between customers and the development team. Agile teams embrace change and iterate on product features in close collaboration with customers instead of adhering to a binding upfront contract or written agreement. We usually work with compliance, so you cannot just go and contract with a client with having nothing in documentation, but making sure that you actually collaborate with your customers instead of just holding them to a contract. And I think that is the mindset of working in an agile way. But once again, you still need to have your risks minimized and look at your compliance issues. So I wouldn't say don't have got any contracts, but collaborate with your customers and get that agreement going. And then I think this is one of the key ones, is responding to change over following a plan. Agile teams do not follow a rigid upfront plan. Instead, they quickly respond to change and deliver a valuable product. Any changes to completed work require only minimal rework, since the work is delivered in time box iterations. Remember, we said you break it up in smaller pieces. So because you can chop and change those smaller pieces easier, you're not restricted to just following a plan that that when things do change. Okay, so there are different flavors or methodologies for Agile. You'll hear about Scrum, future-driven development, wet Agile. There are all sorts of different Agile flavors in the different companies. You get Kanban, Scrumban, Crystal Clear, Extreme Programming, Safe, Less. There are so many things, and it depends on just what the organization needs. And I know you guys had a presentation yesterday about choosing between waterfall and Agile. So I think there's a whole list of things that you need to consider when an organization wants to adapt Agile, and in terms of what kind of methodology will work for the organization. Okay, benefits and myths of Agile. So Agile methods help teams perform work effectively and efficiently while delivering a high quality and valuable product. Some of the benefits include faster time to market. Remember the skateboard or the website example. So instead of waiting 3 months until you can launch your website, maybe just launch your landing page, which you can do within a week. So it definitely gives you that faster time to market benefit. Reduce mismatch between requirements and what is delivered. Because you are showing your customers every 2 weeks or what you have done, it's far quicker that they will give you feedback in terms of saying this is actually not what they want. So that because of that cycles of feedback, you reduce the mismatch between your requirements, and you can quickly course correct or change what work was done. Delighted customers, because the customers do see what gets delivered on a more frequent basis, they are usually more delighted, and since they don't have to wait 3 months for their website. Frequent feedback, we get frequent feedback from our customers to see whether we're still on track, are they happy with what we've delivered, and also frequent feedback from the team in terms of what's working and what's not working, so that every time you start with a new iteration, you can actually change the way you do things and try and improve on a continuous basis. And this takes us to our continuous improvement. If something doesn't work, we change it in the next sprint and we try and get things to work better every time. Innovation and experimentation. Because things are just done in shorter sprints, we encourage our teams to be more innovative and to experiment with things. Teams take responsibility for their own work. They're not managed by a manager. It's a self-organizing team. So they are encouraged to actually experiment and be more innovative. And they're not restricted with the traditional principles of management. Better response to change. As we've said before, because you're getting that frequent feedback, it's far easier to change and course correct in an agile approach. Higher productivity. The idea is that you have to finish things in certain iterations, and the teams do get a higher productivity out of that. And then also promotes transparency. The work is visible, everybody knows who's working on what are the impediments, and because it's visible, it's far easier to get those impediments out of the way and to see who's actually performing and who's not doing their work. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more. The benefits, these for me are the most important ones that I've seen in the companies that I've worked at. Okay, so what is Agile? I mean, we all know Dilbert. Dilbert is, his boss is saying, well, we're going to try something called Agile programming. And his idea of Agile programming is that it means no more planning, no more documentation, just start writing code and complaining. And the IT guy is quite happy that it actually has a name. So, but this is not Agile. This is one of the myths. So some of the myths that we have for Agile. Agile is anti-documentation. We did touch on it earlier, but some people do believe that Agile doesn't need any documentation. Agile recommends creating just-in-time and valuable documentation rather than creating bulky upfront documentation. If documentation adds value, it needs to be prioritized the same way as other user stories in the sprint. So you would normally have your BA writing specs and your tester writing test cases, and that gets prioritized as part of the work that you're doing. So instead of creating files and files of documentations before you even start coding, it's focusing on getting that just-in-time documentation. Right, the next myth is Agile involves no planning. And Prof, I think this is one of the comments that you made in one of the previous sessions, is that Agile actually requires a lot more planning than what we think. Sorry, Prof, did you want to add
No,
anything?
I just agreed with you, Joanita. And I said to them, what is so nice having you, because you're actually really an Agile practitioner. So you'll tell us the realities and not the theories, which is lovely.
Yes, no, that's true. And although this is a very theoretical presentation, I try to make it a little bit more practical in terms of how I've seen things. And
yes,
the fact that certain things happened in the companies that I worked, maybe it's completely different in other organizations. So this is basically my experience. And I'm sure if you speak to other Agile people, they will also give you different kinds of stories. But in terms of planning, I think Agile does not encourage detailed upfront planning, but it does recommend creating a product roadmap to visualize and align on product priorities. So you do have your product roadmap, and it will tell you what is this thing going to look like at the end of the day. But apart from that, Agile teams participate in iteration planning and release planning, and it also does daily planning. So when you have your daily stand-up, you stand there and say, okay, guys, what is the plan for today? Are there any impediments? What do we need to do to remove this? So you don't just have one big plan up front. You've got daily planning, you've got sprint planning, you've got your release planning. So there's a lot of planning involved in Agile. And also, when things change, you need to course correct and plan around those changes that happens in your team, your organization, or even in the world, like what we've seen with COVID. So Agile is definitely not anti-planning, but it's anti-static planning. So instead of just having one plan. Then myth 3, Agile does not need design or architecture. So some people do believe that Agile teams do not focus on architecture and design, and that is definitely another myth. Agile frameworks encourage teams to build products with a simple design and to add design complexity only when needed. So instead of doing the complex design up front, let's start with something basic. Remember the skateboard? Start it off with a skateboard, and then you add your features and your complexity to it as you go along. Myth 4, Agile can solve any problem. That is also another myth. And I know a lot of people think that Agile is a silver bullet. It's not true. Agile frameworks can solve problems, but it is not better than any other framework. I think what is true with Agile is that teams fail quicker or faster with Agile. So because you are doing the constant feedback loops, you can quickly see we're completely on the wrong track. The team is not working well together. The customer doesn't like what we've built. And because you haven't done 3 months worth of work, but only 2 weeks worth of work, it's not such a big waste, and you can quickly course correct from there. So it's about failing fast and then fixing the issues that you've picked up. And then the 5, Agile is only relevant for software development. We touched on that. As I've said to you before, a lot of companies are starting to use it in different areas as well. Okay, so I think the reality about projects, and this is not just Agile projects, I think being an advanced project management course, you guys have probably seen this, it's impossible to gather all the requirements at the beginning of a project. Whatever requirements you do gather are guaranteed to change. And I think even more so than maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And then there will always be more to do than what time and money will allow. And I think that is just the reality of the world we live in. Doesn't matter which project you work on. Okay, so I'm going to move over to Scrum. Does anybody have questions on Agile? I know this was very quick, very high level. Any questions, or should we have questions right at the end?
Joanita, there's definitely going to be questions at the end. So, I just like what you was saying, because you might think you're giving us a theoretical one, but you're actually giving us the real practical interpretation of what the theory intends, which I really enjoying, Joanita. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Prof. All right, then let's move over to Scrum. Scrum is just one type of Agile methodology that's used. So I'm just going to quickly touch on what is Scrum and how Scrum is used in organizations. And then I will stop talking, and then you guys can ask me questions. So Scrum, we'll look at a couple of definitions. Scrum is a management framework in which complex products can be developed. It's an incremental approach to developing a product through successive improvements. And we'll look now at how does this incremental approach look like. You break things up in smaller pieces, and you do 2 weeks of work, 2 weeks of sprints of work. So Mike Cohen is one of the founders of the Scrum Alliance. He says, it doesn't matter how good you are today. If you are not better next month, you are no longer Agile. And I think that is the key with any Agile approach. You work in your sprints, you work in your 2-week iterations, but at the end of that, you need to reflect back and say, what can we do better? How can we improve the way we work? How can we improve this design or the development or the testing or wherever we failed in this sprint? What are the things that we're going to do better or differently next time? And I think that is important. We always need to compete against ourselves. Characteristics of Scrum. So your project is divided in small logical chunks. Execution happens in short iterations or sprints. Sprints are time boxed and has clear goals. We've got self-organizing teams. Requirements are captured as items on a list or product backlog. And there's no specific engineering practices prescribed. Scrum operates in an agile environment for delivering products. So who uses Scrum? Scrum is used by so many different organizations. I'm sure I can handle a whole lot on this list as well. But these are some of the main companies that are using. You can see some of the South African companies as well. So Scrum also consists of values, principles, roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. Scrum values, you've got the 5 Scrum values. Courage. Scrum team members have courage to do the right thing and work on tough problems. In a Scrum team, you do not have people who've got higher titles than others. Whether you're a junior developer or a senior business analyst, you need to be able to have the courage to stand up and say, guys, this is the best way to do this. Or if you disagree with something, what I've seen a lot in companies is because teams don't have that courage, you often get people who on higher levels, like your CEO, walking into your IT department and saying, guys, I want you to work on this requirement for me. I need it tomorrow. And that defeats the whole purpose of having Scrum, because a part of the whole Scrum process is that you actually prioritize the work and you see what the business needs, what are the items that you need to work on that will add the most value. So having somebody on Exco walking to IT and telling them this is the most important item because I want it, doesn't necessarily make it the most important item. But organization is only truly agile when they have this courage to stand up and say, sorry, Mr. CEO or Mr. Exco member, we actually have this requirement from compliance, which is far more important than yours. And I think this is one of the things that companies do struggle with, is the culture of adapting that agile mindset and everybody living to those kind of values. Focus. So focus is the next value. Everyone focuses on the work of the sprint and the goals of the Scrum team. So once you have determined what your team is going to work on, this is what they need to focus on. Nobody can bring work in. Nobody can try and distract your Scrum team to work on other items. They need to be able to focus. Also, focus talks about not having unnecessary meetings for the sake of having meetings. There are only certain meetings in Scrum, and that's the only things that your Scrum team or your development team attends, so that they're not distracted by all sorts of outside things. Commitment. People personally commit to achieving the goals of the Scrum team. When you do your planning for the next iteration, every person in the Scrum team needs to commit to the work, to say, you know what, guys, we can do this, or we have got too many items in this list for the next 2 weeks. Let's take some items out because we will not be able to deliver. And because people have got that commitment or that freedom to say we can deliver this, they're also more likely to achieve what they have set out to do for the next 2 weeks. Respect. I think respect is critical for any Scrum team or organization in embracing this mindset. Scrum team members respect each other to be capable, independent people. You cannot have managers watching over everybody's shoulder the whole time to see whether they are doing their work. Because people have got certain skills, we need to respect that they are going to deliver what they committed to delivering. And I think it also comes back to having titles and things like that. You often have Scrum teams where you have a developer who's been doing coding for 20 years, and he might step down and let a very young new guy lead a certain item on the list because this guy has got the experience in that specific field of coding. So it's not about titles or roles, it's respecting that people actually know what they're doing and they are delivering based on their capabilities and skills. And then openness. Scrum team and stakeholders agree to be open about all the work and the challenges with performing the work. I think this is also critical about Scrum. You're transparent, your work is visible on a board, everybody knows what everybody's working on. If there's a blocker, if somebody's been stuck on the same task for 2 or 3 days, we know about it and we need to help each other to fix this. There's no point in hiding that you're struggling with work because you're not helping your team. You're actually just slowing down your entire team. So openness is critical in doing Scrum. Okay, so this is just the Scrum framework. Just high level, you have got your different sprints, and in every sprint you have planning that happens, you've got analysis that happens, you've got development and testing that happens. And then you've got your different roles, people in your Scrum team, your ceremonies, which are your meetings, your Scrum meetings, and your artifacts, which are the things that you produce as part of your Scrum work. So we'll just quickly talk about that. So the Scrum process, you have a vision for a specific product. If this can be a software product, this can be a new item that you're selling, like an iPhone or whatever it is that your team produces. And you've got your stakeholders. So the product owner looks at this product and he breaks it down in what we call a product backlog. A product backlog is a whole list of items of what needs to happen to make this product a reality. So when you start with your sprints, and I'll actually go through to the next slide. Sorry. Okay, yeah, no, I've got a slide coming later. When you start with your sprint, you take this product backlog and you divide it in a smaller list that we call the sprint backlog. And the sprint backlog is the items that you take into a specific sprint that your team will work on. And based on what happens, you've got your burn down chart, and that will say how you're doing in terms of your goals. And on a daily basis, your team has got to stand up. You talk about your goals for the day and any impediments that's holding you back. And then at the end of the sprint, you've got your sprint review, where your customer or your product owner looks at what you've done, gives you feedback, and then you also have a sprint retrospective where as a team you sit together and decide and look at what happened, what went well, what didn't go so well, and how can you improve the next sprint. So that's Scrum process, very high level. Okay, so the components of Scrum, your roles, your ceremonies, and your artifacts. So you've got your roles, product owners, Scrum Master, and the development team, and we'll go into that later. You've got your different ceremonies, we'll talk about that, and also the artifacts, which are the things that you produce in Scrum. So your Scrum roles, the main roles that we are going to touch on is your Scrum Master, your product owner, and your development team. The product owner is the person who represents the customer and decides what gets built. The product owner's primary job is to take care of the business side of the project and also the only source of truth. So the project owner is the person who decides what goes into a sprint. He's the only person who can say, you know what, guys, we're not going to make the sprint. And they're also the person talking to the customers to understand what is it that we need in the project, what is it that we want to deliver. They collaborate with the development team, they plan the work, they prioritize the work, and they define what it is that needs to happen to sign off on the work that's done in a specific sprint. So the product owner key in delivering, in deciding what gets delivered in the Scrum team. The development
Joanita, sorry to interrupt you there.
Yes, Prof.
But just, I don't want to forget to ask you the question. Those product owners are then typically your business analysts. That's a question.
No, not necessarily. So a business analyst might be the person working on the team to break down the requirements from the product owner. So product owner is the person who, for example, a lot of the companies nowadays has got a product team or product department.
Yes, with all the PPOs in it.
Yes.
Okay.
And they are the guys who will go out and do customer surveys and say, oh, this is what our customers are looking for. And then they take that feedback. They might even go and talk to the actuaries, if, for example, in a financial services team, and say, how do we design this product that we adhere to all the actuarial, and the actuaries will go and do all these sums and say, you know what, this is how we need to price this product so we can make money on it.
Okay.
And then the product owner might go and talk to compliance and say, you know, how do we structure this product so we are allowed to sell it? Because they, especially in financial services, there are a lot of rules around legislation in terms of what are you allowed to sell, who's allowed to sell it. So the product owner, yeah, it's a difficult thing to define.
No, thanks, Joanita. So I just wanted to see where, so that is the business process owners, and that's what you're calling the product owners.
Yes.
So that those business analysts are still actively part of the sprint teams to do the analysis and help with the planning and make sure the testing happens correctly according to business needs and those kind of things.
That's correct, yes. So the BA is almost under the product owner because they will take whatever the product owner wants and break it down into actual things.
Chunks, yeah. Okay, thanks, Joanita. Sorry, I interrupted.
No problem. And I think maybe, Prof, just another example, if you look at Apple, a product owner, I've got a hand up there, Raoul, I'll be with you just now. You might have a product owner for the iPhone 13, and that product owner will say, these are the features I want in the phone, and then that will go down to the development team. Sorry, Raoul, you've got a question there?
I think Raoul was saying he's seeing the product owner as the translator between the development team and the business requirements. Am I right, Raoul?
Yes. That was Deandra.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So who's still got a hand up? Somebody's still got a hand up.
Yeah, I think it's.
It's Roll.
Roll, if you're struggling to talk, do you want to maybe just type your question?
I see Roll's hand is down, so maybe we answered Roll. I mean,
No.
you, not me.
Yeah, no, I think we're fine. Thanks, Rob.
Hi, Prof. Okay, no,
Hi.
just my microphone was not going off.
Oh,
So what I want to ask is, if a head of a department wants something done, their point of communication is going to be the head, the product owner, am I correct? And not the Scrum Master.
It depends. So, Raoul, it depends on how your organization is structured. So what I've seen in some organizations is you've got a product owner, for example, for a system, but you've got sales using the system and you've got, let's say, marketing using that system. And then there's always a fight between marketing and sales in terms of whose priorities are the most important.
Yes.
And that makes it very tricky because, you know, if marketing doesn't get their leads into the system, then sales can't sell it. So whose priorities are the most important? So it's very tricky in how some organizations are set up, or also because of legacy systems. So that, you know, because you might have a system that caters for different things, and then it's difficult to say which features are the most important to do. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, you did. Yes, thank you.
And often when you have those meetings, those prioritization meetings, you might want to pull all your departments into that prioritization meeting and say, okay, guys, which of these items on the list will add the most business value? Because sometimes people think my thing is the most important, but it's not necessarily going to give you the highest business value or minimize the most risk. Because sometimes getting the leads into the system is not the highest priority, it's actually fixing this compliance issue so that we do not get a fine from the ombudsman is your biggest business value. So it's having those conversations with your product owners, with your departments in order to decide what's the most important.
Okay, so in another way you could say is, if we're gonna lose money, then that story should have a better have a better priority than what we're not losing money on.
Well, it depends, because if I'm the sales manager, I'm going to tell you, well, I don't care that you're going to lose money. I'm going to bring in more money than what you're going to lose. So my priority is more important.
Okay.
You know, it's finding, you know how it goes in some of those conversations with the different departments butting heads. So it really just depends. You know, it's from company to company, from department to department. You know, it might be that you've got a new campaign and you know that you're going to make millions out of this campaign. So maybe getting this campaign done and dusted and is more important than fixing something that will lose you a little bit of money. Or this little bit of money that you might lose is not a big problem, but it's a bigger problem for the reputational risk of the business.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so it's just having those conversations, and I think that's the key of doing this kind of work, is understanding the context of your organization and having those conversations, and not just deciding in a silo what gets done. It's about talking to the different divisions and deciding what is the most important work to be done. Okay, makes sense? Okay, all right, so I'll move on to development team. So Deandra, you're right. The product owner is the middleman between the dev team and the stakeholders. So dev team, those are the guys who can be analysts, developers, testers, database administrators, and anyone else required to turn user stories into working software. So they're part of the planning, they're self-organizing, so they take initiative and decide how to deliver the sprint goals. They estimate the tasks and make technical decisions around design, and they're also responsible for tracking their own progress towards the daily and sprint goals. And also they ensure quality in all stages of the work. You can't check unless you build quality into the work you do, you can't test quality into the work you do. So it's important to make sure that quality is designed as part of your process. So whether you're a business analyst or developer or tester, you always need to make sure that quality is delivered. Okay, so let me move on. I see we only have 15 minutes left, so I've been talking a lot here, and I really want us to get to the questions. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. Your Scrum Master, their responsibility is to safeguard the Scrum process. They're often the coaches for Scrum and the change agents in the organizations. Scrum Masters are servant leaders, and they protect the team from organizational distractions, and they keep the team focused on the sprint commitments and the goal. So, Andre, where would an architect or design specialist fit in regarding the dev team? I think, once again, it also depends. So I've worked for a company, so at Clientele, we had an overall architect who would sit in on our design meetings, and he will guide the design for us in terms of where the organization's architecture is going. But then at MIP, we would have a senior developer who would be the architect for the work that we were doing. So it really, once again, it's like the previous question. It depends on how your organization is structured and where does your decision making lie. For at MIP, we did specific projects for clients, and that made sense for us to have a senior developer and almost double up as the architect for design as well. And in Clientele, we had an overall system architect for the whole department, and he made those decisions for the different development teams. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks a lot.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it depends on what works, and it depends on how the company is structured. Okay. Right, so this is the Scrum Master. They're the person who needs to look after the team. Often it's called the Scrum Mother or the Scrum Servant Leader. So that's the person who protects the team and who guides the process. I'm going to quickly go through the different Scrum ceremonies. Ceremonies are just a fancy. I've got SMUNGA. Agile strategy can have more than one strategy. Can the waterfall? It depends. So once again, so I think SMUNGA's question, for those of you who can't see it, they want to know is the Agile, can you have a waterfall strategy and an Agile strategy? I think it depends on the projects. So once again, if I can use an example, for Clientele, for example, we had Agile teams working on the different systems. So we had a sales team that worked on sales systems, and they had every 2 weeks, they had certain features that the sales department wanted, which they developed. But then there was an overall project to implement a brand new payroll system, an HR system, and that project was done more in a waterfall approach because it was done with external company. So it really depends, once again, on the company and the different projects that they're running. You can do both, or you could say, we're only doing Agile. So once again, it really depends. At TalkShow, for example, we have a lot of mini projects that we run as waterfall projects because it is something with a set deadline. We have to involve a couple of departments, and we know we're going to launch a different project with those departments. There are similar things that the guys need to do. So it's setting up the sales structure, getting a team to dial, getting the dialer to work, and then making sure that the marketing documentation and everything is in place. Those we actually run as mini waterfall projects because it's almost a cookie cutter of previous projects that we have done. So it's, I don't know, SMUNGA, if that's answering your question. It just really depends on the organization and what it is that you're trying to achieve. Okay, so Scrum ceremonies, let's quickly get back to that before we run out of time. So Scrum meetings are called ceremonies. These ceremonies are time box events that occurs during a sprint, and they're important elements of your delivery process. It's not just meetings for the sake of meetings, and it is a framework to get done, set expectations, empower the team to collaborate and to drive results. You've got your different meetings, you've got your planning meeting. I'm just going to run through this. I'm happy to share my slides with you guys afterwards with all the details. So you've got your planning meeting where the team decides, team sits and look at what the sprint goal is, and they break up the requirements for the next sprint and decide how things are done. Daily stand-up is a daily meeting, 15 minutes in the morning, just to give feedback on what the guys are working on, any impediments, and just planning in terms of how to get the work done. Then at the end of the 2 weeks, there's a sprint review meeting where you show the customer or the product owner what you've delivered or deployed over the past 2 weeks, and you get sign off on the work, or you get feedback on what was done, and you take that feedback and you into the next sprint. And then your retrospective meeting is your meeting with your internal team. It's usually just the Scrum Master and the dev team. The product owner is usually optional, because sometimes you get a product owner who's the problem, and you actually want the team to feel free that they can discuss the issues, so the Scrum Master can go in and try and resolve those things. But the retro meeting gives you an opportunity to say, how can we work better together in the next sprint? So it's that loop of continuous improvement again. Okay, so this is what a typical 2-week sprint look like. Diary is quite open, the team can focus. They only have their 15-minute meetings in the morning, and then maybe one day they set aside for the planning meetings, the demo meeting, and the retrospective. So not just meetings for the sake of meetings, actually some time to work during the 2-week sprint. Okay, artifacts, these are just the things that Scrum teams produce, and they're designed to make information transparent so that everyone has the same understanding of the project. It helps in decision making, it keeps track of what work to do, what work was done, and then the myth about Scrum has no documentation, it comes into artifacts to see what are we working on, what does the requirements look like, and then also making the work visible and transparent. So product backlog, that's the long list of things that you need to work on for this product. The sprint backlog is the short list of things that we're only going to work on the next 2 weeks. And your task cards or user stories are basically a list of it's a breakdown of the sprint backlog and the items that you need to work on. What does success look like for this thing? We call it a definition of done. When is this task done? How are we going to test this task? What does the design look like? And so on. And that's your user stories. And then you've got,
sorry,
yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Can you please go to the previous slide? I think that answers a lot of questions that gets asked. Is that difference between a product backlog and a sprint backlog? I think everybody draws up a product backlog, but expect it to be handled as a sprint backlog. And I like the way you've put it apart there, because a product backlog's never done. So it's an ongoing system, where sprint backlog is what's going to be done in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And I like that distinction between the two. I really like that. That's
fantastic. Thank you, Prof. And I think also maybe one of the things that I forgot to mention is the product backlog gets reprioritized all the time. So you will sit with, let's say, for example, the product owner and the Scrum Master will sit together every week and say, let's look at the product backlog, let's groom it. Because that's an ongoing thing. And I've seen it with a lot of organizations. They miss that grooming step. And this product backlog just keeps on growing and growing, and it looks so overwhelming. But often we need to almost cull the product backlog to say, these things are not relevant anymore, or we've got new features that we need to add to the product backlog, or there's things that's not that important. If we don't have it, it's not a strain smash. So let's put it right at the bottom of the list. Maybe it's the bells and whistles that we don't need now. We just need the basic stuff right now. So I think working with these artifacts is what makes your Scrum team successful. And like I said, I've worked on product backlogs where people have dumped everything on Jira and nobody's got a clue what's on this list. It's just a list of tasks, and we have no idea what is important, what is critical. So I think that is very important to actually work on your artifacts and make sure that you clean it up once in a while. Okay, so then other artifacts, we've got impediment logs. So those are the list of blockers or things that is stopping us from doing the things that we can do. You've got a product vision. So what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? A burn down chart is a report that our Scrum Masters usually produce during a 2-week sprint to say, based on what we said we're going to do, our sprint backlog, how are we faring in terms of the tasks? So it's almost just giving you a burn down to say, you know, we've done out of the 5 stories, we've done 3, 1 is in testing, and another one is it's got a blocker. So just giving us that visual representation of where we're at. And then the sprint goal is what is it that we want to achieve in the next 2 weeks? Big difference between product vision and sprint goal. Product vision is what is this big thing that we're building? Sprint goal is what is it that we want to achieve in the next 2 weeks or during the next sprint. Okay, process. I'm going to quickly, I think I have touched on process. I might just skip this for questions because I see we only have four minutes left. We did speak about this, so I'm not going to go on this again. I just want to maybe just quickly add to this how your sprint falls into your plan, do, check, act cycle of continuous improvement. You're continuously doing and replanning and checking what you're doing. So by the next sprint, you can see what am I going to do better this time. And then last slide before I open it up for questions is there's a big difference between being agile and doing agile. And I think there's so many methodologies and things that you do. A lot of people think it's a checkbox thing. And a lot of people do those Scrum. They have the meetings, they have the artifacts, whatever, but they're not necessarily being agile. And I think that's the important thing is it's one thing to do the stuff, but you know, getting that thinking, that culture of agile is more critical than actually going through the motion. Right, I will stop talking now. Any questions?
Yeah, we thank you. That was awesome. Questions, anybody?
Yeah, sorry, I rushed through everything, guys.
No, but we also, you know, we were asking you stuff as you were going along, and I'm glad we did because there were some things I might have forgotten that you answered that I really am happy that I now know.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Now I'm glad.
Any questions for you, Anita, guys? Yes, Rahul.
Hi, Joanita. Just want to know, how do you measure the work, how it's being done on, for instance, on Jira? When during the sprint they take a certain number of story, how do you measure them on how fast they're going through the work?
Well, it depends. So, for example, on your Jira board, so remember you've got your big product backlog. You take, let's say, 5 stories out of that product backlog to make it your sprint backlog. So you've got 5 things that you're going to work on for the next sprint. And then you size it. So you've got certain story points that you assign to those 5 things. And let's say, for example, out of that 5, you're going to deliver 20 story points for the sprint. And based on that, you put it on a board, and the board can be complex. It can be, say, to do, in analysis, in development, in testing, and then, you know, to be checked in. Or you can have to do, doing, done, depending on how you set up your board. And that board is what you use on a daily basis in your morning stand-up to say, okay, guys, where are we with these tasks? And you can see on Jira, oh, this task, let's say task number 1, whatever it's called, it's currently in analysis. Developer has already worked on task number 2, it's on testing. Or the testers put a note there, there's a blocker, I can't test this, I'm sending it back to development. So it's about making the work visible. And I think with everything is having those conversations. You know, I think I've been in stand-ups where nobody says a word, and you're thinking, guys, you're supposed to know what everybody's in your team is working on. I once had a meeting with a guy who works for one of the other insurance companies, and he believed in a 1-minute stand-up. He said in 1 minute, you should be able to say, where are we tracking, whether everybody's on leave, everybody else need to know where are we as a team. So, and the stand-up is also not a complaint session. You literally need to be able to do it in 15 minutes. What I used to do at clientele, if somebody talked too long, I would tell them that the next day, if they talk too long, they'll either get a 20 Rand fine, or they have to do their feedback while planking. And that would get people to start talking very quickly.
Thank you.
So we see why you call it a Scrum mother.
A Scrum mother, yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
You crack the whip in a very nice way.
Thank you, Nita.
Okay, there was a question. What would you say is the main difference between a project manager and we did, sorry, Deandra, we did answer it. Loma, thank you. Yeah, the planking idea works, but it doesn't work so well with everybody working from home because they all put their videos off so that you don't see how they plank in their pajamas.
Well,
any
other questions, guys? Joanita, thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. I just saw all the, wow, now I understand Agiles, and that's lovely. Thank you very much. I think there's one more question, maybe one last one.
What technique have you used to give people more? Sure, Andrea, there's a different, so what I usually do is in stand-ups, I wouldn't always go around the room in the same way. So that people, because often you can see people on their phones, and I don't want to be like, oh, I'm restricting people from using their phones because, if you work in IT, sometimes there's a crisis or, somebody can't log in. So you need to be able to be accessible to your team. But I would jump around. So I think that would be, for me, one of my tips that I use to make sure that everybody's focused on what we are discussing, because otherwise, if people know that you're going to go in a certain sequence, they know that, oh, there are 3 people in front of me, so I don't need to focus. And also the rule would be is if nobody shows up for work today, you need to know where your team is at. You need to be able to give feedback on every single member of your team. So that's the key of working in not working in silos, and obviously we had to change a lot of things because you're not in a physical stand-up room anymore. So we would have team chats just for feedback or team chats just for blockers, so that people can focus on the work, but there is a list of things that we know that are blockers, and we can always refer back to them. Yeah, especially with remote working, it is difficult. And, a lot of people don't like videos. I think there are issues that they have, but, just try and make it fun as well. Otherwise, I think people also lose interest, and keep it to the 15 minutes because, we all have very small attention spans. And as soon as meetings are too long, we lose interest and then you don't get people talking. Make sense? Does it help?
Yeah, it does. If I may, so it sounds like the Scrum Master is a very dangerous role. Like you've got to be motherly and you've got to step on people's toes.
Yes.
And while you've also you've got to get people out of their comfort zones while also be cognizant of what they're comfortable with and what makes them productive. How do you balance that?
You see, I think this is where it comes the concept of being a servant leader. You're not like the guy cracking the whip. You're almost, I think there's so much around that I can say around being a servant leader. You're serving your team. You're there to help them. You're there to encourage them, and you're also there to drag them along sometimes, because you do get the guys who wants to run the show and who's, and especially with, IT people, you get the guy, they're all the smartest guy ever. So they want to say what they want to say. And then you've got maybe a tester who's very quiet and reserved and who doesn't talk a lot. So you need to just encourage them to speak up and and sometimes just ask them direct questions to say, okay, what do you think about this? Do you agree with this design? Or if you could design this, how would you have done this differently? So just try and encourage them, almost like, well, how would you raise your children nowadays? Get them also to be part of the family and say the same.
Thanks, Joanita. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Joanita, and thank you again for your wisdom. I mean, this was such a nice session. It was so nice to have an active agile practitioner, especially obviously in the software space, which it's intended for, to share all that magic with us, Joanita. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Marie. It's so great to be here. And as always, I love doing this. So it's always fun to be with you guys. And yeah, good luck, everybody. You're in good hands with Prof. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your course.
Joanita, the guys ask if they're allowed to have your slides. I think your slides is such a wonderful journey, you know, just to explain the agile thing.
Perfect. I'm happy to share it. I'll put it in a PDF because I think the pictures are quite large. So I'll put it in a PDF. Marie, can I send it to you, or do you want me to post it on the team chat?
No, you can send it to me and I'll share with the delegates. No problem.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you so much, Joanita.
Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome day, and it was lovely to be here.
And have a pina colada on the beach for us today while we sit